Welcome to the Nanovic Forum. Some of you have been at Nanovic Forum events before. Many of you know about the Nanovic Institute. I'm Jim McAdams. I'm the director of the Institute. The idea for the Nanovic Forum came from Bob Nanovic, who's our founder and donor. And Bob's idea in starting this event was to try to get very notable people to campus to spend several days with us and talk about what they do. And so when I invite people, like our guest tonight, I invite them to do whatever they want to do. So it's a little bit like a Make-A-Wish Foundation. And we've had people do all kinds of wonderful things and off the beaten path sorts of things. We have in the past few years had some people as Horst Köhler, former president of Germany, Anna Zapolska, former prime minister of Poland, Chris Patton, the last governor of Hong Kong, and on and on. So it's distinguished people, but it's something more than that. In putting together the forum, what we've tried to think about is how do we get people who speak to Notre Dame? That is, people who resonate with what makes Notre Dame great and also what makes it special. And particularly with questions about life, what is human life all about how we should act, how should we treat others, what is our relationship with God. And so in making these invitations, we've sought out people who are willing to talk about these questions, and also for whom these questions have had great meaning in their lives. I should add, we've also sought out people who believe in higher education and what it represents, who believe that higher education should be more than just the passing on of skills, that higher education itself should be about the development of humanistic thought and of deep thought about meaningful questions. And particularly we've sought out people who like students. Imagine that at a university. And so many of you have had or will have either this week or on other occasions the opportunity to meet with some of these eminent figures. Today, our guest comes to us, well, originally from Poland, but he was just explaining to me, he's actually just coming from Yakutsk, Siberia, where he's teaching a class, which is farther than I have to walk when I go to class. And so he's coming from Yakutsk, but he made a quick stop in Tatarstan for the Muslim Film Festival there, one day, and then all the way to the United States. So we already, for those of us who knew about jet lag, we can kind of factor that in. And so our guest is a really remarkable person, somebody who is a very eminent figure in modern film, in European film, somebody who has, and we can all read on the web, somebody who has won many, many awards, somebody who has directed plays, who has staged operas, who has done amazing things. But importantly also somebody who reflects our own wish list of our guests. Somebody who is interested in asking deep questions about life, and in his case about spirituality, which is so important to Notre Dame. Our guest received, and I will read this, the Robert Bresson Award from the Pontifical Council for Culture at the Holy See, where he currently serves as a consultant. And I just want to read the conditions for the award. The award is given to the film director who has given a significant testimony of sincerity and intensity in the difficult path of seeking spiritual meaning for our life. And one thing that you know from seeing our guests' films is that this theme runs through all of them. Later on, I will tell you about some more events that we have, but today I want to welcome Krzysztof Zanussi, and Krzysztof will be talking with us about, this is something I've been trying to figure out my whole life, strategies of life, how to have your cake and eat it too, and yes, I would like to resolve this question tonight.
Ahead of time, I think we promised that there will be no resolution of this question. As long as we are alive, we are supposed to look for the answer, but we'll never find it as a definite answer. Whoever has a definite answer is already wrong. That's my belief. But I would like to welcome you. I'm very pleased that so many of you found time and risked your time to stay with me. As a filmmaker, I feel more comfortable when I'm showing films than when I'm talking about other topics. The title of this meeting is the translation of the title of my latest book. I just published a book 2 months ago, and it's brand new. And it is about what is in the title. The first part, very serious, strategies of life. And the second part is about very common desire, how to have a cake and to eat it at the same time. How to be and how to have, because we want both. And how to find the balance is a big problem. It was always a big problem for me. So this book is kind of a catalogue of choices that I think most people take. So I thought it would be interesting to put it in words. I was also putting it as a series of lectures. So I will try to synthesize it now, very short. And of course, my point of reference is my own life. I'm a dinosaur, as you can see. I am 76. So I belong to a minority that is still alive at that age, according to statistics. And life expectation is usually about that big in developed countries. And I have very dramatic recollections because I was born in Central Europe, and I was born 3 months before the World War II started. So it was, of course, I don't remember the beginning of the war, but my parents were rather, well, maybe not wealthy, but well-off people. My father was a civil engineer and worked as an architect as well. The same my grandfather and grandfather. On the spear side, I have Italian roots, northern Italy. Friuli, or Friuli in German, is the province that belonged to Austria in 19th century, and south of Poland belonged to Austria as well. So one of my ancestors just moved building railroads, and they were built in the 40s of last century. So that was, well, pre-last century now, 19th century. And that's what brought them to Poland, and they became Polish like I am. However, I have a weak spot for Italy, for natural reasons. I love opera, for example. And to tell you something, because my biography is relevant only for you to such points when you want to ask, why do I say certain things, and what kind of experience allows me to make some remarks. But what maybe has more universal meaning is experience of a child. One part of the experience I don't remember. I was born as a relatively rich infant. They like this formulation because it's absurd. But my parents were quite rich, and it lasted 3 months of my life. So no memory whatsoever. But my mother explained to me something that many of you probably don't think about. First, I was a late child. I think I was desired, at least my parents convinced me about it. And at that time, of course, a little bit older parents are over-sensitive about hygiene, and I was kept in a very clean room, and disinfection was happening very often. And after 3 months after bombing, when the water was cut, there is a very easy way to feed a child when there is no water supply. You take water from the gutter, you put it on the spoon, you put a candle underneath, and the water boils. When it is boiled, it is safe. And that's how I continue my development as a human being, drinking this kind of water. And I'm not allergic to anything, so I think it was good. But in a moral sense, my recollections go very far back to the age when I was 3 or 4. And I was taught as a child, of course, all war children were prematurely grown up. And I think it was about when I was 3 or 4 when I was explained that as a good boy, I have to say truth, but not always. Because if a German soldier is knocking to the door and my parents are behind me, I have to say loud, nobody at home, and I'm locked out. Very likely the German soldier will go somewhere else. And a good boy says a lie, and a bad boy will say the truth. And then German will break into my apartment and probably take my parents. So it was already something complicated. When the war was over and the communist Poland started, in my early age, I had a very serious conversation with my father, and he explained to me that in school, what the teacher of physics, of mathematics, of chemistry tells me is true, and I'm supposed to learn it. But whatever the teacher of Polish language, of literature, of history, of biology, of geography, whatever they tell me, I have to report at home. My parents will tell me the truth, and I'm not supposed to share this truth in school with anybody. Listen, it was not so funny and not so easy as an experience. And we had to learn this double thinking. And half of my schoolmates had the same background, and sometimes in the school, during the lesson, were giving signs to each other. We know this is a lie. And the others, who had no parents to tell them the truth, they didn't know, they thought maybe this is true. So as you understand, this was a very complex childhood. And maybe that's already one of the reasons why finally I decided to be a storyteller, because that's my real profession. I do it using films, but sometimes writing for stage, sometimes talking, but that's always the same. It is telling stories. That's my profession. And I thought to make this meeting more bearable for you, I will show you some fragments of my films that refer directly to these questions. And the first will be a film called In Full Gallop. I shot it after the fall of communism and the script was ready. This is about my childhood. But under communism, I understood there would be no way to have this film shown because censorship would have stopped it. And it is about me as a boy. And it is 1953. Maybe some of you remember that this is the day, the month when Joseph Stalin died. Also, when I show this film in Russia, it's always creating some sort of confusion, because Russians believe that we had the same experience of Stalinism, and we have different experience. Our approach was definitely different, because the Soviet system was brought to us on Soviet tanks with the total approval of the West. And that was a consequence of Yalta treaties. So I would like you to see a little bit bigger fragment, because otherwise it is confusing. So I have to tell some more things. One of the details which has to be only explained is that one of my cousins who served in British Army, Polish Army on the British side during World War II, got a surgery which at that time was a new revolutionary surgery. It was an artificial hip that was, in fact, in reality, it was an artificial knee. But this was the first joints that were implanted to people wounded during the war. And this happened to my remoted aunt. But she had to sign during the operation, which happened, I don't know, in Cairo or somewhere where the army was moving, that this fragment made out of platinum belongs to the government of England. And it is not her property. So after her death, it has to be restored and given back. And it was funny to me to such an extent that I put it to the film, because I vaguely remember when all this happened. She died, and we had to organize a secret autopsy of the body to remove this precious piece. But whole family decided we are not going to give it back to the British, because they signed Yalta Treaty. So they cheated on us. And I put it to the film as a little joke. But the real issue, to illustrate the mood of the time, is the death of Stalin, which for many of us was a day of great joy. It's maybe not very Christian to be happy when somebody dies, but in fact, my real question, which I brought to the priest, and he got scared, because I was curious. I had always some kind of theological curiosity. I wanted to know if a soul goes to hell right after the death or after the funeral, which is a substantial question. But once I asked it, the priest thought that such a perfidious child must be a provocator, and that I must be sent by the police. He didn't answer the question. And I don't put it in the film because I thought it is too much to make you believe. But I show another episode, which is also linked to maybe one of the great preoccupations that my generation had. We belonged to the privileged class. We lost all our privileges, but we didn't lose our consciousness. We didn't lose our culture. So the participation in high culture was the only proof that we haven't been degraded. We're using the word, which is not very much used anymore, declassation, losing place in your class. And that's why learning was so important for us. We all believe that we will be as much worth as much we learn, because the rest were all in poverty. And we had all no other chances. And at the same time, education was restricted, and people who had bad class background, as it was called, had no access to higher studies. It was simply said that they are not worth to be trained. So this is a complex which was very strong, and the fear that I may be kicked out from the school, and I was in reality kicked out of school, it's not in the film. I was sent to the craft school, and I'm totally not talented for crafts, because somebody denounced me that I was saying things, bringing them from home, which were unacceptable from the ideological point of view. So when you know all these little details, you may see the film about a boy and his aunt, because parents are not present in a big city, and this slightly eccentric aunt who is modeled after a real person. That was my point of reference, and this aunt was able to tell me many strange things. Like, for example, that to lie is one thing, but not to say something what is not true is a different thing. I'm still thinking where is the difference? But for a little kid, it was a big problem to understand. And aunt was already experienced because she lived Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. So I bring this old story not to talk so much about my own biography, but to point out that already during your childhood, you learn some patterns of thinking, of judging, and you learn very early this distinction between good and evil, and very much depended how you're guided and how strong your instincts are. So I would now like to show you some, maybe 5, maybe a few more minutes of this film. And well, there's one falsification, that's why the leading character has a different name. But that's a problem of of storytelling. In order to make you identifying with the film, you must have this little boy, nice, pleasant. It was not me. So I changed the name, because had I been so good looking and so charming, I would have had a different life. I wonder if better or not, probably not much better, but very different. I had to fight my way because I was fat and rather unpleasant, I know it. So that's why this is modified. It doesn't correspond to the history. Go ahead, Miss Galop. Oh, one more thing which we can watch and talk if you switch off the lights. It is that horse riding temporarily, could we switch off the lights? Temporarily was forbidden because it was considered a sport of the upper class. And we were having a little stable which was also kind of disobedience. We are not supposed to ride horses. A little bit louder, please, if you may.
Ale komu to wszystko zawdzięczamy? Jego królewskości i mojej zmarłej kuzynce.
A nie lepiej to wydawać z umiarem?
Co?
Look on the black caviar that he's eating without moderation.
Bolszewicy zabrali? Już drugi raz tego głupstwa nie są.
You know, but this experience that we all have, that whatever you collect as money-wise, one day or another may be taken away from you. So you're only as rich as much as you can give. But when you don't give, you don't have. It is illusion that in the bank it is written that you have something in your account. Next day there is no bank and no account. And horse riding for me at that time, it was a symbol of liberation, of joy of life in this very repressive system. That was our joy. And that's a guy who is representing me. My cousin had some hairpiece that was somehow disappeared.
Ciociu, co to był za galop? Człowiek wie, że żyje.
Landscape of Warsaw after the war, almost 80% ruined. And this platinum hip has been removed, and this man was a witness.
Gdzie są pieniądze? Platyna.
A jakie pieniądze, jaka platyna? Ale nie ma.
Thank you.
Oh, he was present during the autopsy, and now he's coming and trying to blackmail them.
I've come regarding the woman who died. I have her declaration stating that when she dies, her platina biodril can be recovered. It's the property of His Majesty's government.
Too late. I have sold it.
But that isn't honest. Nieuczciwe.
Nieuczciwe? A Jałta to było uczciwe? A Sikorski? A rząd w Lublinie? Uczciwe? Tak! Zobacz. Tylko kawałek sprzedany. Teraz pomyśl, gdzie schowamy. No?
Może do pieca. Albo do umywalki.
Nie, też to. No?
No to gdzie?
Nigdzie. Nieskowanego nie znajdą.
Postanowili go zabalsamować. Będzie leżał koło Lenina, którego sam zabił. Skąd wiesz? Czytałem. W czym? Jest taka książka o Sendowskiego Lenin. Pożycz. Nie mogę, przecież jest zabronione.
Dziś umarł przywódca postępowej ludzkości, towarzysz Józef Wissarionowicz Stalin. W tym tragicznym dniu obejmiemy wartę przed jego popiersiem. Będziemy dyżurować dzień i noc. Zostaną wyznaczeni uczniowie, w pierwszej kolejności przodownicy w nauce.
Stajemy razem. Nie. Dlaczego? Najwyżej, że ścigają ze szkoły potrafi. Ale ja wtedy musiałem. Kłamiesz. Nic nie musiałem.
Cisza! W takiej chwili musimy umieć zachować powagę.
Przestań, zwariowałeś? Śmieli się o godzinie 0:28. Obaj zanosili się śmiechem, a nawet robili obraźliwe gesty, zwłaszcza Hubert.
A dlaczego ty nie reagowałeś?
Zapisałem.
On kłamie. Nikt nie robił żadnych gestów.
On jest czarna reakcja. On już w zeszłym roku brał udział w próbie zakłócenia manifestacji pierwszomajowej.
On sam brał, a poza tym to on walczy ze mną o pierwsze miejsce w klasie.
Dosyć. Sprawa jest zbyt poważna. Stanie na następnej Radzie Pedagogicznej.
Zobaczysz, jak teraz wylecisz ze szkoły. Ja będę, przepraszam, że ksiądz jeszcze nie popełnił grzechu. Tylko chciałam wiedzieć, czy to, co miałam zrobić, to na pewno jest grzech. Bo ja już miałam raz taki problem. Bo podglądałem, a nie było co. I ja powiedziałam tego na spowiedzi. A teraz ja mam zamiar. Bo ja sobie postanowiłam, że jak będę musiał, to zrobię akurat świństwo. Ja bardzo się spieszę. Już. A ja się bardzo spieszę, bo ja idę do szkoły i...
Ty przyjdziesz do mnie do zakrystii po lekcji.
Ale to już będzie za późno. On powtarza wiadomości z wrogiego radia, które słucha.
Czy to prawda?
Ale ja słucham go do nauki języka. On sieje niewiarę w socjalizm. On powtarza, co tam słyszał.
To już poważniejszy zarzut.
Ale to jest nieprawda. A poza tym to... On czyta książki, które są wycofane z biblioteki. Kłamstwo, udowodnij! Tak. To pokaż, tu masz tornistrze.
No proszę bardzo. 1930 rok, wydawnictwo sanacyjne. Państwo spojrzą sami.
Ale to jego książka, on mi chciał pożyczyć.
A ty chciałeś to czytać. Skąd się wzięła ta książka?
Ja ją znalazłem.
Pakuj się. Nie ma sensu przedłużać tej rozmowy. Ja nie wiem, jak towarzyszka rozstrzygnie to w swoim partyjnym sumieniu, ale my nie widzimy żadnych szans na to, żeby Hubert kontynuował naukę. Najlepiej, jak pójdzie do zawodu. Wykształcenie podstawowe mu wystarczy. Klasę 7 skończy zaocznie i może klasa robotnicza nauczy go tego wszystkiego, czego nie nauczyła go szkoła.
Klasa robotnicza to tak.
Czy mogę wziąć swoją książkę?
Ale nic nie przekręciłeś? Naprawdę mamy brać osła?
Tak ciotka mówiła. Mówiła, że to najważniejsze, tak samo jak wtedy. Osioł w koszu.
A było chociaż zamówienie?
Ja nic nie wiem, ciotka sama układała plan.
No tak, ale jeśli nam się nie uda.
To wrócimy, to ja się zabiję. Nie pójdę do pracy.
A co ci szkodzi?
Ja widzę, co się dzieje z Ksawerem. Nie chcę, żeby tam było ze mną. Zabiję się.
A jak to zrobisz?
Ja tylko tak powiedziałem, że się zabiję. Ja po prostu dam się zabić. Pójdę przejść przez granicę i nikt nie zastrzeli.
Hubert, trzeba tak uciekać, żeby cię nie zabili.
Mówią, że są zamówieni, tak jak w zeszłym roku. przez żonę towarzysza ministra. Są z osłem.
Osła wyciągnięcie.
Wat surprise!
No moc.
Czy taki minister to może wszystko załatwić?
Nie wiem, ale ten wszystko może.
To znaczy, że wszystko może.
To może na przykład kazać kogoś rozstrzelać. Już nieraz korzystał z tego prawa.
No to dlaczego miałby mi pomóc?
No właśnie dlatego. I co go kosztuje taki jeden telefon i będzie wyglądało, że jest człowiekiem i ma nawet serce.
No ale czy to jest dobrze prosić takiego człowieka o pomoc?
Dlaczego jeszcze 8 nie osiadłali?
A ten osiołek coś nam rozrabia w szkole, no. Co to znaczy? Trzeba będzie przeprowadzić porządną samokrytykę.
Nie, ja tego nie napiszę. Nie będę się kaił.
No przecież włożyłeś mu książkę do tornistra. I to nie było uczciwe.
No nie było. Ale on nam nie doniósł i nakłamał.
Hubert.
A ty uważasz, że jesteś w porządku? Tak od początku do końca?
Nie.
No widzisz. Widzisz, gdybyś był w porządku, to co innego miałbyś wtedy zupełnie inną pozycję, a tak? Tak dałeś się w grę i ja myślę, że musisz się pokajać.
No ja się też wdałam w grę. I to dawno. Ty myślisz, że ja nie musiałam nakłamać ministrowi? Ile musiałam? A nikt tego przecież nie lubi.
A poza tym przyznaję, że czytałem książki o charakterze kontrrewolucyjnym, szkalujące towarzysza Lenina i pożyczałem je kolegom. Potępiam swoje niedojrzałe zachowanie. Obiecuję zerwać z nim i przestrzegać zasad etyki socjalistycznej.
Widzicie, na tym właśnie polega nasza wiara w człowieka. Damy Hubertowi jeszcze jedną szansę i przyjmiemy go w naszym gronie. Możesz usiąść.
All right, that's what I wanted to show you.
A nie tak.
The most important reflection I have from this period of my own life, and I try to put into the dialogue, is that once your own actions are not clean, you're immediately vulnerable. And if you have clean hands, then you may try to fight or even defend yourself. But if not, you may be in trouble. Well, that was my childhood and starting school. And at that time, as all my family generation, they were all constructors, architects. I was expected to be an architect too. But my father, who wanted to conserve my taste intact, was showing me these new socialistic constructions and was explaining to me why they are ugly, why they are out of proportion, why they are designed by an ignorant architect. And I realized that I will be doing exactly the same and then explaining my children in the future that this is all awful, ugly, and done by very uncultivated architect. So that was the reason why suddenly I switched my interest and I moved to physics. Because physics was something what I knew is true, and I knew it is not going to be ideologized. No, you cannot apply ideology to it. And that's where I spent 4 years of my life. I can tell you ahead of time, my love to physics is still there, but physics never loved me. And I repeat this joke with some sort of nostalgia because I like very much people I met. And I've learned from my 4 years of regular studies of physics some very important things, and I think I continue in my life. My interest is in the same place. You know, I was learning physics in the 50s, and it was already a beginning of a new era, which didn't reach general public yet. General public is thinking in categories, terms of Newton's physics. And since Einstein, we're living in a different world. I don't want to get into the details, and my English is not good enough to be more specific. But there is one notion which has reappeared to modern physics and was absent in 19th century. 19th century was mechanistic, was based on a classical mechanism. And there was no room for mystery, for all what we now recognize in contemporary physics as mysterious, which is a religious notion. And of the physicists I know, all of them are, one way or another, I would qualify them as believers, because they don't accept the vision of the world built from little elements and the world that you can explain to the end. They know that the world is full of mysterious aspects. And when I'm talking about life, I'm looking for mystery. I'm trying to understand how things happen. I understand, I cannot understand mystery, but I have to recognize that mystery is there. That for some reason somebody met somebody else and there is a happy marriage. And for some other reason, some other person missed the meeting and will never find his second half. That one person will be touched with cancer, and there will be no wrongdoing, there will be no guilt, and he will suffer maybe for us, if there is a balance. I'm very keen to think that in the modern world, theology has lots to learn from science and use the instruments that science is offering us. These instruments are fantastic, and they help us to deal with Bible because it opens possibilities of interpretation that we were traditionally calling metaphorical, literary. Not necessarily. They may be quite exact, but they were formulated in a language appropriate to the shepherds and fishermen who were listening to Christ. So that's my background. And in one of my later films, I try to show the whole film is about my preoccupation about mystery and about the fact that if you will see life deeply enough, we see that nothing can be simply explained, and that somebody is above us and somebody understands we don't. I was fascinated later on by biology. I never studied it, but I think that this age will be the new century, will be the century of biology, even more than physics. And let me show you this story, which is a fictitious story. My protagonist is not like myself. However, he has some of my preoccupations. And I'm showing him when he was a physicist, he dropped his studies because he made his future life pregnant. And he accepted responsibility, so he said, all right, I will not study, I have to work to face my responsibility. And he's working as a technician in mental institute. I invented it to bring my own doubts and preoccupations about what human being is, because sometimes there are cases where you see human being behaving like a mechanism, like 17th century, 18th century philosophers were interpreting human being. And from another point of view, you see all that makes sense, but sometimes we're unable to follow this sense, and we have to surrender. So let me show you some scenes from my film Illumination. It was shot in the mid-70s. It was accepted by Polish censorship with some objections. Fortunately, they cut only one sequence which was related to political events. I wanted to show social involvement of my protagonist, and this is missing in the film. But in scientific part, they left it. And I tried to invent my language in this film, because about such problems, normal narrative is not handy to, the rules of normal narrative are not good enough to be used. So I tried something that is a mixture between an essay and a narrative. So let me show you a little fragment of the Illumination.
Współczesna neurofizjologia dąży do ustalenia, które struktury mózgu są odpowiedzialne za poszczególne stany i czynności organizmu. Eksperymenty prowadzą do zestawiania coraz dokładniejszych map mózgu. Małpie wszczepiono elektrody w określone punkty okolicy podwzgórza. Drażnienie prądem elektrycznym tych obszarów wywołuje natychmiastowe objawy agresji. Po wyłączeniu impulsów zwierzę od razu się uspokaja.
Czy wynoszą ludzie w takie doświadczenia?
Tak.
Tak?
Tak.
Znaczy co, można tak wszczepić komuś elektrody i na zawołanie mieć na przykład napady furii, stan agresji. Tak?
Tak.
Nic nie zapytasz, co on...
His ex-girlfriend.
Ożeniłeś się, masz dzieci. Przypuszczam, że starasz się być bardzo porządnym ojcem i lojalnym mężem.
Myślisz, że to źle?
Podejrzewam cię również, że masz bardzo pięknie podniosłe problemy. I strasznie serio siebie traktujesz. Ogromnie. Myślę, że nie powinniśmy tak się sobą przejmować. Chyba naprawdę nie jesteśmy tacy ważni, jak nam się wydaje. Czy to są myśli, które...
Ja nie wiem, po prostu może i moje, może i czyjeś, nie wiem, ale tak jak teraz nie wiem, że moje myśli.
Pana myśli. One są u Pana w głowie?
Dochodzą mi do głowy.
Dochodzą do głowy, tak? No to może ktoś przysyła.
Nie no, ja bym już żyjący tak jak pierwszy, to może by tak było, że ktoś, a teraz ja nie wiem, chyba nie.
Dla celów diagnostycznych pobiera się płyn mózgowo-rdzeniowy u chorego. Następnie płyn ten wstrzykuje się pająkowi. Pod wpływem wstrzykniętej substancji sieć tkana przez pająka ulega odkształceniom. Normalna sieć pajęcza. Sieć tkana po wstrzyknięciu płynu rdzeniowo-mózgowego chorego. Według doświadczeń niemieckiego badacza Petera Witta, wyraźne i charakterystyczne odkształcenia sieci pajęczej występują wtedy, kiedy chory cierpi na schizofrenię.
Adam, to nie spali, Adam, nie chcę, Adam, to nie spali, Adam, to nie spali, Adam, to nie spali, Adam, to nie spali, Adam, to nie spali,
Chyba, panie Franko, się tak zastanawiam, po co ci ludzie żyją? Sami sobie kłopot robią i innym. Ale forsę na to idzie, panie. Szkoda panu? Nie, nie szkoda. Ale tak zastanawiam. Hitler miał rację, pan. O? Hitler. No to co, do gazu chciał pan wszystkich, tak? Nie, do gazu nie, no. Może jakiś humanitarny, wie pan, zastrzykiem albo cholera wie jak, no. Pan rozumie, co pan mówi? A co pan nie rozumie? Zanim on hormonę pydle po prostu, zatrzymaj pan. No co? No już, no.
Tak się boję,
Ale nie będziesz
Powiedz mi, czy według Ciebie istnieje jakieś kryterium, jakaś granica? Ja sobie to nie będę sobie poradzić. Kiedy człowiek jeszcze jest człowiek?
No, z punktu widzenia medycyny, dopóki trwają w nim jakiekolwiek procesy biologiczne.
No przecież są ludzie jak rośliny. To jest naprawdę tylko wegetacja. Ja nie wiem, to są tylko ciała.
No mówisz tak, jakby można było oddzielić duszę od ciała, jakby dusza mogła sobie wyfrunąć z ciała jak gołąbek.
Dobrze, jeżeli tak nie jest, jeżeli jest jakaś jedność, no to naprawdę dlaczego my wkraczamy tak brutalnie, tak ingerujemy w materialną podstawę duszy? Przecież elektrostrząsy to jest amputacja. Przecież to nie są ci sami ludzie przed zabiegiem, po zabiegu.
Zresztą jak każdy zabieg medyczny jest ingerencją w tą materialną podstawę, o której mówisz. Poza tym, no, tutaj nie ma jakichś ewidentnych podziałów. Tutaj nie da się rozdzielić duszy od ciała, zabiegów mniej brutalnych od bardziej brutalnych. Po prostu nie są to sprawy tak ewidentnie rozdzielne.
Jak pan się teraz miewa?
Dobrze.
Nic pana nie boli?
Nie.
Bardzo pan jest zmęczony?
No.
Proszę pana, czy pan teraz coś czuje nieprzyjemnego?
Nie.
Nic?
Nie.
A jak pan się w ogóle czuje?
Nie.
Niech pan teraz uważa, chwileczkę.
Tak.
Czy pan coś czuje nieprzyjemnego?
Tak.
Co?
Tak. Nie wiem, ale może coś włączyć może.
A co włączyć? Dlaczego?
Bo jakiś zapach.
Co to jest za zapach?
Nie wiem.
Czy już wszystko dobrze?
Tak.
Czuje się pan zupełnie dobrze?
Zupełnie.
Chwilę.
Chwileczkę, a czy już te przykre zapachy przeszły?
Nie, nic nie czuję. Już jest...
Nic pan nie czuje?
Nie.
Co się dzieje?
Weźcie to. Weźcie to. Nie,
Co się stało?
Co?
Co się z panem stało?
Nic.
Nic? Wszystko w porządku?
W porządku. A
Już się kończy. Już się kończy ta operacja.
tak?
Robisz muzyki?
Nie, skąd? Wydaje mi się, jakby drętwiały palce, tak sobie brzdąkam po prostu. Jestem matematykiem.
Bywa na czasem, jak się coś zepsuje, to ja lutuję.
Ale ma pan zamiar wrócić na studia?
Tak, oczywiście, jeżeli to tylko będzie możliwe, wie pan. Myślę, że w tym roku mi się to nareszcie uda. Niezależnie od problemów finansowych i innych, tylko że chciałbym zmienić wydział, znaczy pójść na biologię.
A biologię po fizyce? Nie wydaje się to panu krokiem wstecz? Fizyka przynajmniej posługuje się porządnym aparatem matematycznym, a... Ja poszedłem na matematykę dlatego, że ona w ogóle nie odnosi się do rzeczywistości, nie zajmuje się rzeczywistością.
Mi się wydawało, że fizyka jest właśnie tą nauką, która tworzy system praw i zasad tak ogólny, że można nim opisać rzeczywistość, można nim opisać świat. Właśnie, że to jest ten klucz poznania rzeczywistości realnej.
Pan myśli, że ta rzeczywistość jest tak szalenie ważna, żeby się nią tak okropnie przejmować?
Skierowany z rozpoznaniem wstępnym padaczki objawowej. Na podstawie zdjęć rentgenowskich i arteriografii rozpoznano guz lewej okolicy ciemieniowej mózgu.
Panie Franku? Pana proszę. Słuchaj, chciałem pana prosić, że pan po prostu wpadł do mnie do domu, jeśli to możliwe.
Oczywiście.
Chodzi po prostu o to, że pan oddał parę książek, które mam tam z Biblioteki Uniwersyteckiej z Bugu. Mam już wyznaczony termin operacji, wie pan?
Będzie panu ciężko, to są duże księgi, a to oczy się zmieści.
Ja sobie wezmę,
No to dobrze. Proszę pana, czy pan się nie orientuje, dlaczego mój syn nie chce, żebym przyjechała?
Proszę pana, nie wiem, mi się tak, wydaje mi się, że z tego co ja wiem o szpitalu, często chorzy mają takie okresy.
Tak,
chcą być sami.
Tak, rozumiem. Dziękuję panu. Do widzenia.
Dobrze. Daj, proszę. Dobrze. Dziękuję. Proszę. Mhm.
Widzi mnie pan? Kto mnie poznaje?
płacie ciemieniowym i to mu uciskało zdrową tkankę mózgu i dawało ten napad epilepsji. Wiesz to dobrze?
Tak. Co by było, jak mu nie robić operacji?
No miał jeszcze 2 miesiące agonii. Chcesz to zobaczyć pod mikroskopem?
Nie. Czy to ci jest jeszcze potrzebne?
Nie, to pisze do zbiorów.
Po co?
Taki jest zwyczaj.
Z poszukiwaniem zapewne jakiejś drogi dla siebie. Tak. I zainteresował się Pan tym naszym życiem. Chce je Pan lepiej poznać.
No chciałem wiedzieć, jaki jest sens tej...
Widzi Pan, żaden człowiek swojego życia nie poświęci dla pustki zupełnie. Więc jeżeli ludzie, którzy tutaj są i młodzi też są
sami
i odchodzą od tylu wartości, a to dlatego, że tu coś znajdują, tak?
Tak, że
Więc Pan zobaczy tutaj te domki, w których mieszkają ci pustelnicy. My zawsze żyjemy bardzo na łonie przyrody. Nasze tereny są, można powiedzieć, tak zbudowane przy wodzie. I tutaj w tym domku drugim, widzi Pan, pod tą wysoką gruszą, w tym domku mieszkał najstarszy z naszych ojców, który umarł w zeszłym roku. A wstąpił do zakonu jeszcze w zeszłym stuleciu, więc był 70 lat w terenie. A w ostatnim domku na lewo mieszka jeden z ojców, który się całkowicie odosobnił od dawna, od 14 lat. U nas jest ten przywilej, że kapituła generalna może zezwolić na to, żeby człowiek, który bardzo potrzebuje tej samotności, żeby mógł nawet nie przychodzić na wspólne modlitwy i mógł pozostać zupełnie sam.
A jeśli umrze?
A jeśli umrze, to go chowamy.
Przeżywanie stanów, które potocznie nazywa się mistycznymi, wielu badaczy wiąże z układem limbicznym w mózgu. W regulowaniu tych stanów biorą udział substancje zwane neuromediatorami. Przyspieszenie przemiany określonych tak neuromediatorów może być wynikiem ukierunkowanego wysiłku psychicznego jednostki, może również nastąpić pod wpływem środków farmakologicznych, na przykład LSD.
Alright, I wanted you to see this fragment. The film is much longer, has more stories. As I was always intrigued by this pharmacological possibilities of creating something apparently similar to real mystical experience. I've organized recently one of the, well, it's just a public panel discussion, and brought some specialists, and one of them, who declared himself as an agnostic, gave us a very good explanation, updated, how is it now known what kind of chemical intervention may have given results, and how states which would be identified as mystical are explained by the chemistry of the brain. But at the end, he did something very fair. He took a book from his bag and said, ladies and gentlemen, I have shown you, I told you, how much cellulose is in this object, this paper, how much glue, how much metal, plumb, is there, but I didn't tell you that this is carbon. And that's what makes difference. If you explain all chemistry of brain, it is not an explanation of the phenomenon of direct contact with divinity. It is parallel, but it's not the same. And these problems haunt me as much today as they did 40 years ago when I was shooting this film, and I shot many other films, when this recurrent subject matter reappears. What is body, what is mind, what is soul, how they exist together, and where is truth about our human nature? Well, that's my biography, but I think this universal, these questions are all universal, and we all should know something more about the reality, and people who are happy with this all superficial explanations, they miss a great chance to get deeper to understand our existence. I'm just thinking, because of time, that I would probably skip next film. What was it? Well, this is a film I will tell you something about it, but I don't want to show it to you. I will show only this one after a moment. Because when I realized that I'm not going to be a physicist, I decided I run to philosophy. It was something that has to be explained to people who know a little bit about communist system. There was only one state university from Eastern Germany, from Elbau up to Vladivostok. When regular philosophy was taught, it was Krakow State University, Jagiellonian University, because a very prominent phenomenologist, Professor Roman Ingarden, was head of the cathedral, and that's why it was tolerated that we were getting a regular philosophical training, unlike all our colleagues at all the universities who were getting Marxist curriculum of philosophy, very different. Even today, when I speak to my Russian colleagues, I know that when they will make a division between materialistic an idealistic approach. I know they were trained by Marxists, because we were trained in ontology to think about monistic and dualistic approach. And that was something that reflects the difference. I studied philosophy. I knew I was not going to be a philosopher. I was only interested in the matter. And I was making many things, like many students, theater, writing, and amateur films. And out of this fascination in amateur filmmaking, I became a filmmaker because I won a couple of prizes on some festivals. And for a young man, it is very important to get this kind of confirmation that from outside the world, I get a confirmation that what I do is not bad. So I applied to the Film Academy. I passed a very competitive entry examination. I had to compete with many people. I won, and after 3 years, they kicked me out. So it was a strong victory. But also well, I know how many of you are planning to be filmmakers or artists or take part in public life. But that's a very good training for future. You must know that once you are praised or overpraised, and tomorrow you will be over-criticized. This changes, and you have to keep your balance. And when I talk about balance, this is my invention, but I like this counterposition, and this is in my book. The vision of the book, the vision of our life. Is life like walking in a park when grass is cut short? And when you may go left and right, forwards, backwards, everything is permitted, nothing is forbidden. There is no danger, you're safe. That's a very common vision of life today, and human freedom means you may go wherever you want. But there is a conflicting image, totally opposite. Life is a walk across a jungle, and one false step, you're lost. So better watch your guide and observe the rules, because you may be totally destroyed. And when I see many young people, I know that are all promising. And when I see older people, I know how many of them are already rats, because they did some bad steps. Always you may hope that you will repair the damage, but not always you manage to do it. So I think the image of life as a jungle is more realistic, is more adequate, and this state of peace in which we live is rather exceptional. It's not given for granted. We have to be very careful not to destroy our world. Well, that's my view, and that's what I try to share with you. I will show you, before we have some questions, I will show you another fragment. This time it will be an English language film, so it will be more comfortable for you. It is shot in the 80s. It is called Imperative. Well, some reference to Immanuel Kant. I know it is, the first scenes I will show you, they look a little bit theatrical. There's a long dialogue. But dialogue about things which I find substantial. This curiosity about life and how the world is constructed. Which I hope I still have this curiosity, and I think it is a very important element of human life. When we see mystery, we are curious. When we don't see mystery, we have no curiosity anymore. And my protagonist this time, the film was shot in, is a German-French co-production. My protagonist is an actor who played Jesus Christ in Zeffirelli, Jesus of Nazareth, Robert Powell, I think magnificent British actor. In my film, he is a mathematician teaching on tiny German university. And he's an agnostic, but he is fascinated by mystery. And he finds mystery even in most banal physical facts. He says you have to always to see why did it happen. and he is contrasted with his girlfriend, who is a biologist and has this very flat, direct approach to life as a cause and result chain. And I try to put it to the dialogue. And on the opposite side, I have an old professor, mathematician, who is a believer. And in my film, I have chosen for him to be orthodox. Because in the Western world, orthodoxy is even more exotic and maybe less known, so I get him pure. You won't see very much of him, just his mourning. This is a little anecdote. When I was shooting this film, it was in the 80s, I always had my Polish passport. So in order to work abroad, I had to have a permission from Polish Minister of Culture. And they had read the script, which was about a mathematician in Germany, so why should they care? But they stopped the permission. They said, no, we must not allow you to make this film. I said, why? Oh, they say, because there is an old professor, and he originally was a Russian emigre. They said, we have an agreement with the Soviet Union that whenever a Russian character appears in a film that a Pole is concerned with, we have to consult the Soviet embassy. And we don't believe that they will approve the script. So in a moment, fortunately, I said, but he's not Russian, he's Serbian. Oh, Serbian, with Yugoslavia we have no such agreement. And that's why he will be Serbian in the film. So maybe that will be the last fragment of the film, which is, I will tell you later that the ending, to me, is an optimistic one because my agnostic protagonist discovers God by experimenting on himself, trying to provoke God, what is absolutely intolerable. However, God's mercy is bigger. But this is the ending, which I'm not going to show you, but just the beginning. So it's very gloomy and very depressing. And we shot it partly in Germany, partly in France. And this film at its time had a circulation quite big. It's black and white. Only the ending is in color. I won't show you the ending. Color is fair, but I thought it is more appropriate to do it black and white. But believe me or not, to make black and white film today is more difficult than making it in color, because it is not saleable. With this black and white, people don't want to buy it for television. And that's why I had to make an ending so that the film sells at color and black and white, and that is all right. So let us go with imperative for a moment. And if you may watch the music, I worked all my life long with the same composer. He passed away very recently, and he was also composer of religious music. He was a very deep believer. So whenever I put something connected,
in a quarter of an hour. 17 minutes to be precise.
What for?
For it to fall. There's a warm breeze. It's thawing the snow and every so often it falls.
Aren't you cold?
17 minutes from the moment I began timing. Not that that makes any difference. To the roof, the snow, or to us.
Shut the window, you'll freeze. Is something the matter?
Couldn't sleep. Something in the air, change in the weather, perhaps.
Take something.
What?
Downer.
No.
Why not? What's the point in suffering? To get off that windowsill.
No, I won't.
You will.
I'd like to jump out instead.
You won't. Why should you?
No reason. Why did the snow fall? No reason for that either.
Were you drinking last night?
Yvonne, why did you say that? I'm just sitting on a window ledge at 7 o'clock in the morning without any clothes on, philosophizing a little, so for you there has to be a reason. No. No, I was not drinking last night. No, there was no reason. Just as there is no reason why I should climb out the window. But that is not to say that I shan't.
Fine. You won't do anything stupid, because you're not inclined to do anything stupid. And to go walking around in the snow, stark naked at 7 in the morning is stupid. Especially for a lecturer in mathematics with a promising future.
That was petty. Stupid provocation. You seem to think that everything I do is designed deliberately to annoy you. You always have to find the motivation, don't you? Can't step out of your chance circle of cause and effect. Your dog salivates at the sight of food and your little mice run around their maze in search of cheese. You're blind. Stupefied by science.
Somebody has to be a realist. If only to cook breakfast for a visionary who sits freezing his kidneys on the window ledge.
That someone has to be woman. Since women are the mainstay of the species, and they don't get carried away by extremes.
That's right. I keep explaining to you.
Women have been mystics, saints, courtesans. You don't all have to be so limited by your sex.
Then find yourself another one.
Thanks. It's only a question of will. It could be different if you wanted to, if you chose to be.
For God's sake, will you get down? It's getting light. People will see you, students. Why must you make a spectacle of yourself? There's no sense in it.
Have you any idea what sense is? What it signifies? In your biologist brain, sense is adaptation for survival. Well, it makes no sense. It serves no useful purpose. And that is precisely why I'm doing it! Now, I'm going to walk out onto that window ledge and I'm going to go down the drain pipe. And you will shrug your shoulders and retreat to the kitchen so that you don't have to watch. And you will do that because that is the way you are conditioned.
Why must I stand there and watch you make an idiot of yourself just to prove you wrong? Rationalizing in the window will only give you a cold. Do get dressed.
Why should I?
in order to go to work.
Why should I?
In order to make some money.
I don't have to. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to get dressed, or make money, or live.
The day before yesterday, you said that all a man is obliged to do is to die.
It was better put that way.
That was the professor. You memorize things like a parrot. Do you ever stop to think what they mean?
Did you find your philosophy so original?
It may not be original, but it exists. I think, therefore I experience something that is beyond your comprehension. Even though you can put a word to everything and argue with all the Latinisms in your bloody zoology. I know you can talk abstractions by the hour. You only experience what you can touch, taste, or smell. No thought ever affects you as an experience.
Thought or not, you don't experience anything.
You're improving. The contradiction is about as far as you'll get.
Shall I climb out with you?
Please come on. Pavlov's dog, conditioned determinism.
You are not normal.
Did you say not normal?
Yes.
For a long time, it's hereditary.
And you weren't afraid of having a child, but
Now I would be.
oh, that's not true. Yvonne, you can't believe that. You can't blame me for just a piece of eccentricity. It didn't hurt anybody. It's not abnormal to try and find one's freedom. Here in this little town, in this tiny university, an insignificant mathematics lecturer wonders if he's free. I just wanted to know what it felt like.
The laws of statistics deal with aggregates. And what are aggregates? There are no aggregates in nature, only individual facts. All aggregates are products of the mind. Man arranges the phenomena of nature, combining them into individual classes by means of concepts, and concepts don't exist materially. To me, at any rate, there's no such thing as a world of ideas.
What of seas or rivers? They are aggregates which exist objectively.
What exists objectively are particles of water and sand. You combine them into a nominal whole by employing the concept of sea or river.
And what follows from that?
Mathematical statistics as a tool, but there's no reality behind it whatsoever.
Have a look. Look here. For 2 years, I've been computing the number dispersions at roulette. One day I borrow all I can and put the lot on the number indicated by my calculations. And I'm bound to win. Are you alright? You got a cold or something?
Tempting fate.
Fate doesn't exist.
God.
Do you believe God exists? He's a product of the mind, if ever there was one.
I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not.
What does the answer depend on?
Toss a coin.
To prove God's existence, you mean?
Yes. If you put it that way. I'll put up the money if you'll flutter.
Oh, well, no. Alone is more concrete than our preceding topic. No, forget it. Look, if I win, you get a share of the proceeds. No, then I'd rather borrow from people not in the know, okay?
All right, I'll give you the money when you lose. Except I may not have enough to cover the whole debt.
Ah, that can't happen. I must win. My calculations say so.
The only way you can be secure of winning at roulette is if you have psychokinetics going for you. That is, if true people can move objects by willpower.
Do you believe that?
Do you have any proof to the contrary? Well, you're right to use the word believe. We don't know one way or the other, but we are entitled to believe.
But do you believe?
If you really want to know, I don't believe in anything. Except death.
All right, so that's the fragment of the film I wanted you to see, and of course it is addressed to a very special kind of audience. It's not for mass exploitation, but it found its audience. It found that we got a silver prize in Venice for that. And Andrei Tarkovsky, who was a member of the jury, was fighting for it very successfully. Anyway, these are problems that haunt me. They're maybe not the most popular problems, but I think there is room for such filmmakers like myself and many others who would like to deal with other problems. It's not an obligation. But you know, when we work in this profession, which is kind of vocation, at least part of it is, then we have to ask, what is success? And to me, success is if I leave maybe a little praise in my spectator's mind. If he watches my film, pays the ticket, and forgets it next day, it means it was a chewing gum, it was an illusion. And my accountant is very happy, but I'm not. I want to bring you something that you haven't met before, to make you acquainted with people you haven't met before, and to remind you problems that maybe sometimes you have abandoned. And that's why I try to make films, and in spite of my advanced age, I still want to do it. Maybe I will be able to make my next film next year. It will be about Faust, that is, about somebody who tries to sell his soul, but he doesn't believe that the soul exists. So it will be a tricky bargain. Anyway, I try to present to you the question of strategies of life. In life you choose various strategies, and some of them are good, some of them are wrong. Sometimes you're a winner, sometimes you're a loser. And I think it's good to remind people from time to time, to remind myself, that nothing is for granted, that life is a risky business, and if we lead it stupidly, we may face catastrophe. And it happens to many people. So that worries me, and that's why I make films. Anyway, I wonder if you have any questions. I think we have another couple of minutes left, and I will be most happy to try to answer.
First of all, thank you very much. I'd be glad to call anybody. It's our custom to have students begin. And so are there any students who would like to pose questions? Who are courageous enough to pose questions?
Well, there is a saying that there are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. What makes it more difficult to ask, but sometimes it's very difficult to find a question.
Well, then we'll just take questions. Yeah.
It's a very general question. Just what keeps you going? Like, what keeps you thinking that you've been emphasizing all throughout the lecture? Is there anything in life, or?
I asked myself this question, and I think my wife got an answer just by coincidence, because we're leaving the forest. And very often in the morning, we see people jogging. So they are running and running, and lazy, and I don't like to run. My wife also said it is so strange. So once she asked them, why are you running? Are you afraid of something? And one of them answers, yes, we're trying to escape the death. So that was the motivation. To be alive, it means to act, to be with people, to justify the biological fact that I am alive. You know, this was questioned when I was a child, when I was a young man. It was not obvious as it is to most normal people, that being alive is your right and is something what is absolutely guaranteed. Not to me. So I know that better to run, otherwise something is behind me and it's not present.
Thank you.
Yes.
In a number of the films, or all the films that showed here, faith is an element of it. What is the greatest challenge in trying to translate the discussion of faith into the language of film?
Well, I think that maybe sometimes spectator wants to have such a dialogue on screen. Maybe yes, maybe not. You know, I'm producing most of my films, and I didn't go bankrupt through my whole life. So it means that some public has this kind of interest. It's not general public, it's not most. They made our films more accessible than this one. But I thought for such a selected audience, they will also select more difficult pieces, especially at this university. And it is true that today, we talk a lot, not about religion. People like to talk to the church. They often reproach me why I'm not shooting films about priests who are pedomaniacs and so on, pedophiles. And I understand these are important issues, but not necessarily for me. I've seen so many bad priests and good priests in my life, as many as I have seen good and bad people. So I'm interested, what is it about? Not how believers behave. Sometimes they behave well, sometimes they don't. But what is behind it? So where can we feel God's existence and what consequences it has? That's my interest. So even more metaphysics than ethics. However, ethics is important. And if detached from metaphysics, it becomes a game. We are only an exercise. So probably that's, because I made some comedies too in my life, but I didn't bring them tonight. Yes, please.
What would be the one compliment or praise that you would want somebody to say of your films that you were hoping for when you made the films?
Listen, I came across this expression which I think applies to all contacts with work of art, narrative or even non-narrative. When my spectator feels that he's a bit more aware of his human condition after seeing one of my films, it's my victory. And when you look at sitcom, you have a guarantee that you will be exactly the same after seeing it as before, or maybe even worse.
Krzysztof Zanussi, many thanks.
Oh, thank you.
For this tremendous talk. I'm happy to say that our guests will join us again tomorrow for a public lunch talk, although you have to come on time if you want to get lunch because it's limited at 12:30 in McKenna Hall. And he's going to talk about a popular subject. Mr. Yeltsin, whom you remember, but also Mr. Putin, whom we all know with now. And you knew Yeltsin and you know Putin.
It happens to be, of course. No is much to say.
Yeah.
Oh, I will tell you because that will be a good introduction. When John Paul II was elected as a pope, I happened to be in Mexico and I had my retrospective a long time ago. I don't know when they made me a retrospective. In Mexico City, in the Cineteca Nacional. And they had a press conference. So I knew for sure that nobody will ever ask me one single question on films. That all the questions will be about the new Pope, because it was Polish. So the first question obviously was, do I know the new Pope? And I answered, yes, I do. But I did know John Paul I as a patriarch of Venice. I did know Paul VI, and I did know John XXIII. But this Pope is the first Pope who knows me. So I'm not sure if Mr. Putin still remembers me, but I met him a couple of times, as much as I have met a couple of times Mr. Yeltsin. Of course, these people have many, many encounters in their life. But it is on the edge. It is probable that he may remember me because we met at the very beginning of his term, and we had once quite a long conversation. So I will talk about it. Not all the truth, but some.
Well, when you're talking about Putin, of course, it can't always be the truth. So we'll talk about Putin and Yeltsin tomorrow at 12:30 in McKenna Hall. And then I'm pleased to say we'll show is it your latest film?
It's my latest film, and this film is considered, it's much lighter to watch, but it was considered very controversial, and I was very, very strongly attacked by extreme feminists. So I'm a public enemy of some extreme feminists. I'm very much for feminism, but I have invented a saying, I will repeat it again, that feminism is like cholesterol. There is a good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. So I'm for good feminism, but against bad feminism. Bad feminism wants to make women as bad as men or even worse. And I don't think it's a good idea. So this is a film about the corporate life and about religion, because all my films, one way or another, touch question of faith and religion.
Fantastic. And that will be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the Browning Cinema. And we have free tickets for the film. So again, let me thank you for being with us. Continuing